The Tunguska Event. On June 30, 1908, a massive explosion occurred over the Tunguska region of Siberia, Russia. The blast was so powerful that it flattened over 770 square miles of forest and caused seismic waves that could be detected around the world. The exact cause of the explosion is still a mystery, but it is believed to have been caused by a meteor or asteroid entering the Earth's atmosphere and exploding before impact. The Dancing Plague. In 1518, a strange phenomenon occurred in Strasbourg, France. A woman known as Frau Trophia started dancing in the streets and did not stop for days. Soon, dozens of other people joined her, and the dancing continued for weeks. The bizarre event is known as the Dancing Plague and is believed to have been caused by a combination of social and psychological factors, including stress and mass hysteria. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. In 1959, a group of experienced hikers set out on a trek through the Ural Mountains in Russia. However, they never returned, and their bodies were eventually found scattered around the mountain. The circumstances of their deaths were strange and mysterious, with some of the hikers having injuries consistent with a brutal attack, despite there being no evidence of any other people in the area. The case has never been solved, and it remains a popular topic for conspiracy theorists and true crime enthusiasts. The Great Molasses Flood. In 1919, a storage tank filled with over 2 million gallons of molasses exploded in Boston, Massachusetts. The resulting flood of thick, sticky molasses killed 21 people and injured over 150 others. The disaster was caused by a combination of factors, including poor construction of the storage tank and unseasonably warm weather, which caused the molasses to ferment and produce gas that built up inside the tank. The Curse of King Tutankhamun. In 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of King Tutankhamun in Egypt. However, soon after the discovery, a series of mysterious deaths and accidents occurred among those involved with the excavation, leading some to believe that the tomb was cursed. The most famous of these incidents was the death of Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer of the excavation, who died shortly after the tomb was opened. While there is no scientific evidence to support the idea of a curse, the legend has persisted and continues to capture the public imagination. The St. Pierre Massacre. In 1902, the town of St. Pierre on the Caribbean island of Martinique was destroyed by a volcanic eruption from nearby Mount Pelee. Most of the town's 30,000 inhabitants were killed in the disaster, with only a handful of survivors. One of the most bizarre and gruesome aspects of the event was the fate of the town's prisoners. Despite being locked up in a heavily fortified jail, all of the inmates were killed by the intense heat and poisonous gases that swept through the town. Only one man, a convicted murderer named Louis Auguste Cypris, survived the ordeal by huddling in a corner of his cell that was shielded from the heat. The London Beer Flood. In 1814, a giant vat of beer at the Moe & Company brewery in London ruptured, causing over 323,000 gallons of beer to flood the streets. The resulting wave of beer was up to 15 feet high in some places and caused significant damage to nearby buildings, including the collapse of several houses. At least 8 people were killed in the disaster, and it was rumored that some of the victims drowned in the flood of beer. The Battle of Los Angeles. In 1942, just a few months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, residents of Los Angeles reported seeing unidentified flying objects in the sky. Soon after, the U.S. military began firing anti-aircraft artillery at the objects, which were thought to be Japanese planes. Despite the intense barrage of gunfire, no enemy planes were ever found, leading to speculation that the objects were actually extraterrestrial in origin. The Philadelphia experiment. The U.S. Navy allegedly conducted a secret experiment to make a battleship, the USS Eldridge, invisible to radar and visible light. The experiment is said to have been successful, with the ship disappearing and reappearing in a different location several miles away. However, there were reports of bizarre side effects, including crew members becoming invisible and some suffering from severe burns and radiation sickness. While there is no concrete evidence to support the claims of the Philadelphia experiment, it has become a popular subject for conspiracy theorists and science fiction writers. The Axeman of New Orleans. A serial killer known as the Axeman terrorized the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. The killer broke into homes at night and attacked his victims with an axe or straight razor, often leaving bizarre messages at the crime scene. Despite an intensive investigation, the Axeman was never caught, and his identity remains a mystery to this day. The Toxic Lady. In 1994, a woman named Gloria Ramirez was admitted to a hospital in Riverside, California, with symptoms of cervical cancer. During her treatment, hospital staff noticed an unusual odor and a strange oily sheen on Ramirez's skin. Soon after, several staff members began to feel ill, and one even fainted. Despite efforts to resuscitate her, Ramirez died later that evening. The cause of her death remains a mystery, but it is believed that her body may have been producing toxic fumes due to a combination of medication and illness. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis. In 1945, the USS Indianapolis, a U.S. Navy cruiser, was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine and sank in the Pacific Ocean. Over 1,000 sailors were aboard the ship at the time, and only around 300 survived the initial attack. The survivors were left adrift in the open ocean for 4 days, enduring extreme heat, thirst, and shark attacks. By the time they were rescued, only 316 of the original crew were still alive, making it one of the deadliest incidents in U.S. naval history. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic. In 1962, a laughing epidemic broke out in the village of Kashasha in Tanzania. It started with 3 girls at a boarding school who began to laugh uncontrollably and could not stop. Soon, the laughter spread to other students and eventually to the surrounding community. The epidemic lasted for several months and affected over 1,000 people, causing physical exhaustion, fainting, and even heart attacks. The cause of the outbreak remains a mystery. The mysterious death of Elisa Lam. In 2013, a young woman named Elisa Lam was found dead in a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles, California. The circumstances of her death were bizarre and inexplicable. The hotel's elevator footage showed her acting erratically, as if she were being followed, just moments before her disappearance. Her body was found several weeks later, and the cause of her death remains a mystery to this day. The chrysanthemum throne incident. In 1912, the Japanese Emperor Meiji died, and his son, Emperor Taisho, ascended to the throne. However, the new emperor soon began to exhibit bizarre behavior, including speaking incoherently and wandering the palace grounds at night. He was eventually diagnosed with a mental illness and was placed under the care of his wife, Empress Time. Despite his illness, Emperor Taisho remained on the throne until his death in 1926, and the incident remains a fascinating and tragic chapter in Japanese history. The hintercafic murders. In 1922, 6 members of the Gruber family and their maid were brutally murdered on their farm in Hinterkaifeck, Germany. The killer or killers were never identified, and the crime scene was particularly chilling, with evidence suggesting that the family had been living with their murderer for several days before their deaths. To this day, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most notorious unsolved crimes. The ghost ship Mary Celeste. In 1872, the Mary Celeste, a merchant ship sailing from New York to Italy, was found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean with no crew on board. The ship was fully provisioned and undamaged, but the crew's personal belongings and lifeboat were missing. The mystery of the Mary Celeste has never been fully solved, with theories ranging from piracy to mutiny to supernatural. The WOW! Signal. In 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University picked up a mysterious signal from outer space that lasted for exactly 72 seconds. The signal was so unusual that the astronomer who discovered it wrote, "Wow," in the margin of his data printout, giving it its name. To this day, no one knows what caused the WOW! Signal, and it remains one of the most intriguing mysteries in astronomy. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart. In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart set out on a solo flight around the world. However, she and her plane disappeared over the Pacific Ocean, and despite extensive search efforts, no trace of them was ever found. Theories about Earhart's fate range from crash landing on a remote island to being captured by the Japanese military, but the mystery of her disappearance continues to fascinate and inspire people around the world.